Hello, everyone. I hope you guys can hear me. All right, let's wait for one more minute and then we will start. Okay, let me start and I will share my screen. Hopefully you can see a white screen, right? That's the whiteboard that I will be using. Okay, so hello everyone. This is a session on AWS CloudFormation, and my name is Amit, and I will be talking to you about CloudFormation, brief introduction, and a small demo on how you can use CloudFormation for your enterprise infrastructure requirements, right? So before talking about CloudFormation, let's talk about the, the problem statement that CloudFormation solves, okay? So if you have your team and you are the DevOps or infrastructure guy in your team who is managing the infrastructure and AWS resources for your team. You most likely, if you are a beginner or if your team is new, you would log into AWS console and create the infrastructure. Right? Let's say your team needs a few servers, right? And maybe few S3 buckets to store the data and share the data, and maybe few databases, right? This is the infrastructure requirement for your team. Maybe 5 servers, right? 3 buckets and 2 databases. And then for each infrastructure, you have some configurations like um, one server could be Ubuntu, right? 3 servers could be RHEL, right? And one is, let's say, Windows. And then S3 buckets may have different names. The databases may have different flavors. So maybe one is MySQL and one is PostgreSQL, right? One MySQL is 100 GB of storage and PostgreSQL is 1 TB of storage. So depending on the use case, you will, if your team asks that, hey Amit, can you create this infrastructure for us? You will go to the AWS console and create it, right? All good, job done. But then if we have to manage this, and when the scaling happens, right? Right now, team is small. Tomorrow, the team may grow, the product may grow, and then you will require multiple more copies of this infrastructure. Then how would you manage it, right? Logging in every day and making configuration changes is all very challenging. So how would you manage it? So the idea is that instead of managing infrastructure manually, right, you should manage it as a piece of code, right? So you write code and then using that code, You feed that code into a tool called configuration management tool. And then the configuration management tool understands your code, understands your requirements, and then actually implements those requirements, right? So you can write, I need 5 servers, I need 3 buckets, I need 2 databases, and then one database is 100 GB, another database 1 TB. So you can define all this configuration in the code. You feed the code and feed the code to the config management tool, and that tool takes care of creating that environment. Of course, you have to give the tool access and information about where the infrastructure is going to be created, like AWS account, AWS credentials, and all that. So one example that you might have heard of such a tool is Terraform. Right? Terraform is a tool which you can use to provision new infrastructure. Right? Now, if you are in AWS, you may say, hey, why do I need to use any other tool like Terraform? Can AWS not give me such a tool? Right? So AWS also provides a tool which is called as CloudFormation. Cloud formation, right? The concept is same. You write your code, you define your infra resources, right? You feed it to CloudFormation, and then CloudFormation is going to create a set of the resources that you require. So it will create your servers, it will create your buckets. My drawing is not that good because I'm drawing with a mouse, so please cooperate. So it can create all these infrastructures for you. You just write your code, put it in a Git repository, or put it in an S3 bucket, and then from there, you can pull the code and feed it to CloudFormation. So why do we need to do this? Why it is a good idea to write code for your infrastructure? Right. First is that you have the documentation of your infrastructure. Right. If somebody says, hey, I know we have 10 databases, but what are the storage allocated to those databases? How will you get that information? You will have to log into the portal and look into the properties of each database. Rather than that, you can just look at a code and say, hey, we have provisioned these resources. So this is the data set of the resources. Right? So that's one advantage. Second advantage is if anybody says, hey, we don't need 100 GB anymore, we just need 50 GB of database, or 100 GB is not enough, can you extend it to 500 GB? So that's the configuration change, right? So if you did not have any config management tool, you would directly go to the portal and make the configuration change. And there you lose the track of who's doing what. Of course, you can use AWS config and AWS uh, security center and all that stuff to keep a track, and audit trail and all to keep a track on the resources. But maybe from that trail is after the change is made, right? If you go to AWS trail, AWS cloud trail, and see who made the changes, you will only see after the change is made. But if your code is in Git repository and you want to make a change and apply it, when you make a change and then take an approval, right? Only the approved changes will be applied. So you make a change to the configuration file, say, hey, we don't need 100 GB, we need 500. So you change that configuration, submit it for code review, and then once it's approved, you apply it. So there is a tracking of infrastructure. You can track it as you track code, right? So this paradigm is also known as infrastructure as code. IaaS. Right? So I'm going to show you today how we use CloudFormation as infrastructure as code. So let's go to my cloud account. Hopefully I'm logged in. I think I logged in. Oh, hold on a sec. I logged in here, a different browser. Right. Hopefully you can see my screen. Okay. So here, if I, so, you can see all these services and all that in your AWS. But let's say you want to create an EC2 instance, right? So what I can do is I can go to CloudFormation, right? This is a service which is available in all the regions, and you can create your infrastructure from here, right? So how do you create? The most important thing to learn here is how do you write this code? How do you write your resources so that the CloudFormation can understand it, right? Now, to write these resources, there is a complete set of documentation available, right? This resource is written in YAML, which is preferred, or JSON, which is equally feature rich. It's just that YAML is more easy to read. Okay. Now you can write it in YAML or JSON, and it's all documented here. Right. So this is CloudFormation, and these piece of code which you feed into CloudFormation is called a template. So it's called a CloudFormation template. Okay. And you can write it in JSON and YAML, but you have to follow a certain structure and keywords which CloudFormation understand, right? So a template will contain some basic sections. Okay. So there is a resources section. Maybe I should write it in a piece of code. Just give me a second. Right. So when you write your CloudFormation code, you write in a CloudFormation.yaml, for example. Okay. And here there are multiple sections. First section is resources, right? Or maybe resource. This is a section. And in this section, you define what resources you want to create. If you want to create an S3 bucket, if you want to create an EC2 instance, all those resources defined here. So the resource details, and the configurations and everything else about those AWS resources are defined here. Okay. Now, this resources section is mandatory. You have to define this. But then there are other optional sections also in CloudFormation template. Okay, you can define some parameters which can make your CloudFormation template parameterized. That means while deploying the servers or while deploying the the resources, you can pass values, right, during runtime. So you can create parameters. There is also description, which is nothing but metadata or information about this template, right? Then there are some conditionals, which we won't have time to cover, but they are used to create some resources conditionally. And there are outputs, which are nothing but configurations so that you can print the output of the. When an S3 bucket is created, maybe you want to print its name. When an EC2 instance is created, maybe you want to print its ID, right? So all those things can be done using outputs, right? So this is how we write the code. Now you don't have to remember this. You can just go to the documentation. How do I access the documentation? Right. So you can go to out here. Template. Come on. How do I find it? Yes. Okay. So here it is. So template format, and these are the sections: description, metadata, parameters. You can have rules, mappings, conditions, all that. So this is all documented here. Okay, you don't need to remember that. And details about these sections are also defined here. So what is resources and what is parameters and all that stuff. Now, let's say I want to create an S3 bucket using CloudFormation. So how do I write? So I know these are optional, so let's not get into this. I will also mark it as YAML. So now I want to write some resources and I want to create an S3 bucket, right? How do I write a resource definition for that? So you don't need to memorize anything. You can go to the documentation, and here you will find okay, not here, but if you go back here, template reference, right? So here you will find resource and property reference. Maybe I can zoom in a bit. So, there is a documentation where you can find resource and property reference. And here is the documentation to create all the resources which are supported by CloudFormation in your AWS account, right? So if you want to create S3 buckets, just go through it and somewhere you will find S3. So you see Amazon S3. Click on it. Now in S3, there are multiple kinds of resources. So you can create bucket, you can create bucket policy, you can create storage lens, you can create access grant, but we want to create a bucket. So let's click on the bucket thing, right? And this is the documentation for AWS S3 bucket. So here is the syntax. When you say property resources, you have to define the type of the resource, which is AWS S3 bucket. Okay. So a resource in the resource section, you can define all your resources. Each resource has a type. So first is resources logical name. So let's call it as my S3 bucket. Okay. Now I want to create my S3 bucket. The type is S3 bucket. And then we have the properties. Right. So now we write the properties. In the properties, we define whatever we can define. Now, what can we define in properties? Again, it's all defined in the documentation. We can define the encryption, we can define the bucket name, we can define the ownership controls, we can define tags, or whatever we can define via console while creating S3 bucket, we can all define there. So for now, I will just say, let's define a bucket name. Okay, bucket name is, now the S3 bucket names have to be globally unique. So I can just maybe give it some random characters like this. Okay, this is the name of the bucket that I want to create. And that's it. My very basic minimal CloudFormation template is ready. Okay. Now this template is ready. Let me save it. Let's call it as CloudFormation YAML. This is ready now. Right? Now, if I want to apply it, applying is pretty straightforward. I will go to CloudFormation and say create a stack. What is a stack? A stack is nothing but a collection of resources which are created from a template. I say create a stack. All right, choose and let me zoom in. And then it says choose an existing template, or you want to build a template. I want to choose an existing template because I have created already. So I can either point to an Amazon S3 URL where I might have stored the template, or I can upload a template file, or I can sync from Git. Now in the production environments, you will always sync from Git because that's where your code will be. But here, because we are demonstrating, I will upload a template file, right? And then I can say choose a file. And if I go to downloads, this is my YAML template. So template is uploaded. It will upload in a temporary S3 bucket. Click on next. And now I need to give the name to the stack. What is a stack? It's nothing but the collection of resources or set of resources created by CloudFormation. And in the stack name, I will give my stack. Click on next. I don't want to give anything else. That's all fine. Click on next, review, and submit. And that's basically it. Now CloudFormation is going to analyze my template, and it will understand what are the resources that I want to create. So you can see here, it already understood that S3 bucket has to be created. Creation is in progress, and the bucket creation is done. And finally, my stack is completely ready. Right? I can in this stack. So if I go to CloudFormation again and go to stacks, you can see my stack, which I created, and you can see all the resources in the stack. So there is only one resource created, which is my S3 bucket. And I can click on this link to take me through that bucket. So you see this bucket is created. It exists. And that's it. This is how you can create a resource in CloudFormation. Now, S3 is one of the simplest resource to create. Let's create an EC2 instance. Okay, let's create an EC2 instance. Now for EC2 instance, what should I do? I don't need to remember anything. Just go to the documentation and I can look for EC2, right? AWS EC2. Here we are. And under EC2, there are a lot of things. There are key pairs, there is security groups, there is EBS, auto scaling groups. Yeah, there are many things. So what do we want to create? We want to create an instance. So AWS EC2 instance. Here. Now, how do we write? The type is this, and then we define the properties. So let's create an instance, my EC2. Okay. And I'll say type is this. And properties is something that we are going to define. So what are the properties? Now you see there are many properties here. For S3 bucket also we saw a lot of properties here. The thing is, not all the properties are mandatory to be provided. Right? In the bucket we saw there are so many properties, but we provided only the bucket name. In EC2 also there are so many properties. Now each property has its own description, what does it do and all that. And if you scroll down, you can see everything here for each property. For example, let's say CPU options. The CPU options for the instance. Okay. Then something which is easy to understand. Image ID, right, which is the AMI to be used for this particular instance. Right. Now for each resource, there is also a property called required. Do you need to provide this property in your template? So it's no, you don't need to mandatorily provide this, but if required, you need to, but it's not mandatory. But image ID is conditionally required. That means if you're passing a launch template, you don't need to provide this, but if you're not, then it needs image ID. Similarly, instance type, right? Is it required? No, but if you're not using a launch profile, then you need to provide this. Okay, and these are the allowed values. There are also allowed values. These are the only allowed values for this. Right? Okay, so let's create an EC2 instance. So I go here and in the properties, I will say image ID and instance type. These are the two fields that I need to define. For instance type, I will just say T2 micro. And for image ID, I will write some image ID. Let's see if I have something already. Maybe I can copy from there. Yeah, there is this image ID. So this is the image ID that I want to use for this instance. Okay, cool. Let's create it. Now, there are other properties also. For example, you can associate a security group. Right? You can attach a security group to a EC2 instance. So if you already have a security group, you can give its name like SG dash whatever, and you are done. If not, you can create a security group. Now, again, if you want to create a security group as well using CloudFormation, right, then you have to look for that. So in EC2, it might be in security also. So, okay, EC2 security group. So here you can create a security group like this. Right? At the end, there are some examples as well for each resource. So you can create an EC security group like this. Okay, let's do it. Let's say this is my security group. Okay, I'm creating a security group now. And this I will remove. Okay, so this is a security group that I'm creating. Allow HTTP to client host. And I will say from port 80 to port 80, it's allowed ingress, and from port 80 to port 80, it is allowed to egress. So this is a new security group that we want to create. Okay. Now we can do that. Okay. And if you are doing that, then you can say create this security group, and then associate this security group with the EC2 instance. Now, how do you do that? You can just say ref my security group. Right? So what it's going to do is it's going to create a, it's going to try to understand that, hey, an EC2 instance is supposed to be created, but it also requires a security group, and there is a reference to another resource. And that resource should be created first. So this resource will be then picked up, it will be created, and then it will be associated with this. Right? I'll say. Okay, so let's try this now. So what I'm going to do is I will go to my AWS account and let me delete this stack. So when I delete a stack, it will also delete all the resources which were already created as part of the stack and clean up my complete account. So delete is completed. If I refresh, there is no stack anymore. Let's create a new stack. Again, upload the template. Stack name is new stack, let's say. Click on next. And nothing else. Submit. And now see new stack is created and it's creating the resource. And there are, okay. So here it says security group cannot be created without VPC ID. All right, so let's go here. And in the security group, you see there is a VPC ID, a property. Let's see if that's a mandatory property. So there are a lot of properties. Group description is required. Okay, we have not given a group description. Did we give? We gave. We did not give. Oh, we gave group description, right? Okay, that's required. Group name is not required, so it will be automatically created. Egress and ingress is not required. But if I want to define egress, then in the egress, okay, hold on a second, I need to go back. So if we have to define egress and ingress, and VPC is conditional. Okay, so it says if there is no specified VPC and no default VPC, security group creation fails. So looks like I may not have a default VPC. Right? So let's see, do I have a VPC here in my region? VPC. I think there is a VPC, which is this one. It is a default VPC. So not sure why I'm getting a complaint. Okay, anyways, so let's do one thing. This is the ID of my VPC. So I copy it. And in my code, I'm going to define a VPC ID. And the VPC ID is this one. Okay, let's see if that helps. Right, so now we're going to delete this tag and create a new one. All right, so looks like something is going on. I hope we don't get any error. All right, so you see a security group is created, and then EC2 instance is being created, right? It takes time for EC2 instance to create. S3 bucket was also there, so that is also being created. Everything is done. Okay, I can go to my instance. Create this instance is created now, right? And security group is also created. There you go. So done. So it was a little bit more complicated CloudFormation template, but that is not the end. You can go ahead and make it conditional. You can add parameters, right? So you can do a lot of things here. So, but yeah, that's the basic gist of how CloudFormation works. That's all I wanted to share with you. Any questions? There's a question already from Srinivas. In real time, do we need to write using Terraform or by CloudFormation? It depends on what strategy your organization has. Most of the organizations have a strategy of going via Terraform for a couple of reasons. One is you can learn Terraform and then use it with any cloud provider, right? So you don't need to learn different tools for different providers. Another is that you get the skill set for Terraform more easier than for specific cloud technologies. I hope I answered your question. Question is, how is state management happening? So it's unlike Terraform. In Terraform, there is state management, but in CloudFormation, there is no state management. How to add security key pair in case if we already have? Oh, that's easy. If you go to the documentation, and you can look for key pair. EC2 key pair. So you can either create a key pair, you can create a new key pair as well, or when you create an instance, if you already have a key pair, then you can specify one. The key name, you can just give the name of the key. Okay. How to add security? Oh, and can you demo the resource generator? Maybe I can. Next time I can. This creation of AWS Cloud is always on time, one time. Yes, it is one time, but there is also a concept of drifts. Okay, so there is also a concept of drifts. So if you go to CloudFormation, you created some resource, and then later you figured out somebody has changed the resources from the portal directly, then you can find that, hey, there is a drift, and then you can fix the drift. Is it allowed to share geo data in? I'm not sure what is geo's data, but okay. Please elaborate on the question. One moment. If we want to make changes to an existing resource, do we need to delete that resource first and then create it again? Just a second. So if you want to make changes to existing resource, right? You have a stack. If you want to change, let's say you want to change the AMI ID of EC2 instance, you want to change it to something else, right? Let's say we have an area. Let's say we want to give this AMI ID, right? This is a change in the configuration. Okay. If you have that, then you can go to update stack. Okay. And then click on create a change set. So it's a replace existing template or use an existing template. Okay, so you say, or maybe better than this, you can say make a direct update. Okay, so this previous replace existing template, and then you upload the template file. And then next, and then submit. So now update is in progress. And only my EC2 instance is updating. So because this is an update, it requires new physical resource. Okay. Next question is, how can we modify only one resource in a CloudFormation stack without impacting the other resource? You always work with the stack. If you go and try to modify individual resources, it goes against the principles of CloudFormation. So you cannot actually. But if you can update your template file for just one resource, then it is fine, right? What is the hierarchy of resources being created? There is no resource group in AWS. But yeah, there is no hierarchy unless there is a implied dependency, right? So when you create a Terraform resource, you can also use a keyword called depends on. So you can say, hey, before creating this EC2 instance, this EC2 instance depends on an S3 bucket. So S3 bucket will be created first. Or if you are giving references, then this is an implicit hierarchy that this resource will be created before this. Oh, but if you talk about the actual hierarchy concept in AWS, well, there is no resource group or management group concept here, unlike Azure or project, right? In GCP, there is projects. Is it same in other cloud platforms? If you know, when we can do in others. So no, for example, in Azure, you have to use something called as Bicep or ARM templates. So that's a different tool. From existing AWS cloud, can we create YAML file out of it? Yes, that you can. So in your own time, go ahead and look at IAC generator. So if you go to CloudFormation, you can look at IAC generator. And what it can do is you can scan your resources, and then it will find out all the resources that you already have with their configurations, and then you can create a template. How can I use CloudFormation with CI/CD pipelines for multi-account, multi-region deployments? So you can integrate CloudFormation with code pipelines very easily, pretty straightforward. Cool. Very interesting questions. Thank you for paying attention and listening to me blabbering on this topic. I hope it gave you required insights. Right? Okay, there's one more question. Can we do runtime scale up with CloudFormation YAML template? Scale up, yes. Hold on a sec. So in it depends, yeah. So for example, in Terraform, you can have a property called count, but that's not here. Okay, so you only have to work with the YAML files. If you are creating same configurations, EC2 instances, then maybe use auto scaling groups. Okay, but there is no built-in count or scaling out kind of concept here. Right. So Mrinal, for state management, it does not have the state management as in Terraform, right? As I mentioned, the state management is via stack only. So since, well, Terraform has to rely on state management because it does not have a persistent connectivity with AWS, right? It cannot access all your resources in runtime. Sorry, it can only access during runtime, but when you're not running any operation on Terraform, there is no connectivity between AWS and Terraform. CloudFormation lives in your AWS account. So it does not need to maintain a state. It can query the state of all the resources which are created as part of stack. So no need to maintain any specific state. Okay. And any change that happens on the actual resources can be found out as drifts. Is there any email notification we can set up once my stack is up? That I never checked. Maybe you can have some hooks. No. There should be some SNS kind of configuration. I will have to look into that. I have never done it. Hold on a sec. While creating a stack, maybe we might have something. Notifications. Yes, we do have notifications. So you can connect with an SNS topic, okay, and then get all the notification messages in the SNS topic. And then you can create a simple notification service or simple mail service, and then connect it with an SNS topic and send an email whenever there is an event that matches your interest. Which cloud is preferable in real-time organizations? There is no answer to this. All the organizations are looking at all the cloud providers, right? It's always a matter of cost and service and cost and benefit analysis, to be frank. All right. Cool. So thank you guys. Thank you for your time. And I hope you liked the session. And I do these sessions like once every month. So maybe next time I can do something similar to CloudFormation, some questions I got here, or maybe some other topic. So please be in touch with SkillUpRight, and I'll see you next time. Right? Thanks. Thank you. Bye-bye.